Morning, I'm Reverend Roy Atwood, and we're glad that you are joining us this morning on our live show. We're getting ready for worship. I'm joined today by Reverend Elizabeth Moseley,
Good morning.
Reverend Elizabeth Moseley. Do you ever feel, like it's supposed to be the honorable and the reverend? Do you ever like call people on that or anything?
No, I feel like if
oh, you're a nice person. You're not just like calling people out.
I feel like if
the reverend.
I feel like if you get my first name right, then we're doing great. And the title is just bonus.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So if you're watching us live, comment on Facebook or YouTube. We've got them up right here so we can see your comments. We'll comment back to you. And if you're watching us sometime in the future, welcome to the past. It's a beautiful place. So we just finished up our series, This Is Us. We did 4 weeks on the proposed mission statement, which was adopted by church council.
Yes, voted and approved.
So it's official. It's not a proposed mission statement anymore.
Exactly.
It's the mission statement.
It's ours.
So just to remind us, it's to magnify God's love for all people by creating space for belonging, purpose, justice, and joy. So what's your favorite part of the mission statement? Which part is you're just like, oh, that's kind of my part?
I love the phrase, by creating space.
That's not one of the 4 things.
I know.
You've completely thrown me for a loop.
But that's what we are called to do. And I love that because we're like magnifying God's love. But how are we doing that? By creating space. And here's why I love that part of the mission statement.
Yes.
Because I think that it gives us this very specific task, and we have to think creatively. And we have to consider the spaces that are already here and the space that isn't here yet, and the people that need new space and that need different space. And we have to think about space as not even literal, but also figurative, like classes or ideas or experiences that are beyond, just a physical space, but it also makes us think of physical space. I just love how creative it makes us be and how all-encompassing it is. So that's my favorite part of the mission statement.
So the church that I worked at in New York City for 5 years did not have pews. It originally did. It was built in 1891, and it had pews, much like we have pews. Mm-hmm. But they took them out in the 50s, and it became sort of a multi-purpose performance space. And there was a lot of art, and particularly dance, that happened in that venue that wouldn't have been able to happen if the pews had still been there. And the current senior minister, while I was there, that was one of her big ideas that she talked about with people, is the concept of removing the pews. And, particularly in New England area, Northeast, the churches aren't, doing as well as they might be here. And so talking about how do you create a thriving place for people and creating space, physically creating space for people who might not be in the building otherwise by removing the pews. Mm-hmm. But then she also talked about how you have to remove the pews in your own mind, which are like the little barriers that you've set up that you're like, well, we can't do that because of this, this, and this. And she said, well, you have to remove the pews from your head before you can even remove the pews from your space.
I
so
love
I thought
that.
that was really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it forces you to ask the question, who isn't here and why aren't they here? And have we ensured that they have space? And I think that's a great question that the church should always be asking. And then, of course, space for what? And then we get into the 4 things that we've talked about.
So, now if you have to pick a favorite of belonging, purpose, justice, and joy, what are you going to pick?
Well,
I'm going you back to where I wanted you to go.
Okay, I think for me, it's joy. I love joy. And I firmly believe that, look, joy is one of the fruits of the Spirit, and it is one of the things that I think we as Christians need to really lean into. This is joyful. This is good news. We should be happy to be engaging in our faith. And it's joyful to be together. It's not always easy, but I think if we don't have joy, and for far too long, in some ways, Christianity has been perceived as this very serious and dour and almost like burdensome, like heavy, I don't know, just kind of this dark experience. Like we're so like serious about this. Yeah, I mean, really. And so, but then I'm like, we're missing this amazing part and aspect of what it means to follow Jesus, and that it is joyful and it is amazing, and it gives us this assurance and this peace and this ability to see and perceive the world as good. And that is amazing, and we should lean into that as Christians. And so I love that that's part of our mission statement here. I
like it too. I think joy is my favorite part, but in part because I think that one might be the hardest for me. I don't know if you've recognized this, but I'm not the most like energetic and cheerful person.
Oh no!
Is that like a new thing that you just
that
didn't?
Surprises me.
Yeah,
actually.
exactly.
I've never.
So I like this idea of joy that you that you like. It's something that you work for, and we actually talk about it on the Studio 3A episode that's coming out this week. That sometimes I don't even try for joy; I just settle for contentment. Like being joyful is too much to ask.
Well, I was going to say, actually, I think a lot of people look at joy and they think it's like fake. And they're like, oh, it's like, toxic positivity, or like, oh, you're just, slapping on a smile for show, and that it's not actually authentic. But that's sad too. I mean, I think we've gotten to a sad place if you look at someone who's happy and joyful and like kind of positive and immediately say that they're like faking it, or it's toxic, or they don't really, it's not like deep in their core.
I think there is a thing among millennials and Gen Z that it's almost like cool to be depressed.
Oh, interesting.
And you haven't come across this culture.
Not cool.
Yeah.
So regardless of what is cool or not, I'm like never the cool one.
It's their full like Twitter accounts that are just like, I'm depressed, and they get like thousands of likes.
Millennial ennui, that kind of thing.
Yes, exactly. And so reclaiming of like, no, depression is like a disorder and not a personality trait.
Oh, yeah.
And saying like, no, you're not just going to be depressed for forever. Like we can work for joy. We can work to create joy. We can put ourselves in situations that generate joy, and that we aren't just stuck being sad because the world sucks. Because there are a lot of things about the world that do suck. But
100%.
There are a lot of things about the world that are good too.
Yeah, so and our faith should give us joy regardless of our experiences and circumstances, because it connects us to something beyond our everyday environment. It connects us to something that is greater than ourselves, that it takes us beyond and above, and I think actually it roots us in the reality of life, but also connects us to something greater.
I agree. So let's transition. Today we're talking about Labor Day. And usually Labor Day is just kind of like a holiday of like, the end of summer. We don't really think about the labor aspect of it. But I wanted to focus on that. So I wanted to ask you how Christianity relates to the labor movement. And when I sent you the script for today, you were like freaked out a little bit about, wait, hold on. We need to talk about this. We need to go into more detail. Where are we going on how does Christianity relate to Labor Day? But we sat together and we brainstormed for a couple of minutes. We came up with a number of, I think, good things of how Christianity relates to Labor Day. So,
I think labor in general.
Yeah.
I mean, when I think of Christianity, when I think of Jesus and how the stories in the Gospels talk about who Jesus spoke to and where Jesus went and who Jesus encountered, I mean, so many of the people that Jesus ministered to and with were everyday laborers.
Yeah.
They were fishermen. They were farmers. I mean, they were shepherds. They were folks in the villages and the towns who worked for a living. And
there's almost no one he interacted with who you would describe as white collar today, besides like tax collectors.
And religious leaders.
Yeah, but other than that, it was all people like, fishers, farmers, shepherds, everyone in the fields.
Yeah, I mean, so that's who he went to. That's who he ministered to. That's who he spoke to. And that's also the characters that show up in a lot of his parables.
Yeah.
And so I think of how many of his parables talk about laborers or managers or owners, and it really is an interesting, in some ways, it doesn't matter kind of what relationship you have to work, you're called to be honest and honorable, to work hard, and to treat people fairly.
Yeah.
And so there was a lot that Jesus had to say about how to work and how to engage with those who work. And I think it does call all of us then to consider our work and how there's honor and it's noble to work, and to consider how we treat those who work maybe for us or with us, and to make sure that we are treating them with honor and fairly and respectfully.
Well, a lot of the crux of Jesus's movement was criticizing the religious leaders of the time and how they were mistreating the day-to-day people who were relying on their teachings and taking advantage of them. And he went in and flipped the tables because the capital powers that be were taking advantage of those with less money. And so you see, there's a lot to relate in the labor movement to Jesus's movement, even if he was looking at it more on a religious side of taking, the powers taking advantage of others. But there's a capital side too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So if you want to get into Jesus and socialism, there's a whole road to go down there that we're not going to talk about today.
There can be.
Yes. So next week, we're starting a series on evangelism. And evangelism is kind of like a dirty word among progressive Christians, which is why we're calling the series the E word, because it's like we don't even want to say the E word, evangelism.
Right.
Why do you think it's become kind of why do you think it's gotten a bad rap?
Well, I think it's because of how people have different Christian movements throughout, for decades, really centuries, really millennia probably, but different Christian movements have gone about evangelizing. Mm-hmm. And so the way of evangelism in and of itself, I actually think is amazing and it's lovely. And it's actually something we all do when we find something we love. We tell other people about it.
Yes.
If you love a skincare product, you're going to tell all your friends about it.
Yeah.
If you love a new brand of clothing, if you go someplace and it's the best meal you've ever had in your life, you tell people about it. We post it on our Instagram and other social media.
Before we went on the air, we were just talking about older movies that we like.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you want it, whenever you experience something that you love, you want to tell other people about it. So that's really what. Loosely, that's what evangelism is. Yeah. It's how Christianity has evangelized that I think has really damaged that word and our kind of our acceptance of it, because we associate then Christian evangelism with things like someone standing on a street corner, yelling at, people as they walk down Bourbon Street, which actually did happen to me once in New Orleans. It was 2 a.m. and we were walking down Bourbon Street, and a man is legit on a soapbox with a megaphone yelling at people about how they're all going to hell. And I was like, bro, this is not it. You are not making a difference in any of our lives. In fact, you're probably scaring a lot of people away. Yeah,
one of not my finer moments in the history of my life, I was on my way to work, and there was a guy screaming in the subway about sort of anti-gay rhetoric. And to the point that I couldn't hear the podcast that I was listening to in my own headphones. That's how loud he was yelling. And so I started yelling really loudly back at him. And I'm sure everyone in the subway car was like, please stop doing this.
Just ignore him.
But it was just so terrible that that this was the view that people were having of Christianity. That's the loud view that people have.
Yeah. Have you ever seen the movie Saved, speaking of old movies?
I think I've seen part of it, but not all of it. But she throws the Bible
at
people.
Oh my gosh, that is that scene is burned in my memory, because she literally takes the Bible and chunks it at someone's back and says, I am full of the love of God, of Christ, or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's just such a great visual of what so many Christians do when they're trying to evangelize folks.
So we're going to do a series about maybe better ways to do evangelism.
Can I say one more thing about evangelism?
Yes.
So I have a daughter whose name is Evangeline, and the root word is evangelion, and it means good news.
Aww.
And so at first we were kind of like, is this going to make us seem like we're evangelical Christian? But I was like, no, one, it's a beautiful name and it means good news. And so I think we should reclaim this word for sure. But we've already started, because we named our daughter Evangeline.
Do you relate to Brandi Carlile at all? Because she has a daughter named Evangeline.
Do you know how many people sent me the song called The Mother?
Yeah.
Yes. A bajillion.
It's such a good song.
It's a great song.
Okay, so announcements. What do we got coming up? We've got the Pastor's Bible Study starting this week on Wednesday at noon. We've got First Steps. Tell people like the 1 to 2 sentences about what First Steps is.
If you are interested in connecting here at FirstChurch, if you have been visiting, if you want to know more about it, if you want to join the church and are kind of not sure what your first step should be, this is the class for you. You absolutely don't have to join if you come to First Steps. It's a great way to get more information about who we have been in the past and who we are now and where we're going. We do give information about the ministries and missions of the church, so you can get more information on how to get involved, especially if you want to join, but even if you're not quite ready to do that, it's still a great class, and you get free lunch. So we encourage everybody to come on.
So that's next Sunday after worship, and you can do it in person or remote. So even if you're not in Dallas, you can do First Steps.
That's right.
And then we've got some more things coming up the Sunday after, 2 different classes, but we'll get into that later because I can hear that the music has already started.